Welcome to the Living Consciously TV show, coming to you live from our Denver, Colorado studios. I'm your host and moderator, Coach Steve Toth, and our theme today is Everyone Knows When You Are Not Resonant. Do you? Let me introduce you to our guest cast and also our cast members on Skype. Our guest cast today is Jane Warrilow. She is an author and a resonant expert, and she's joining us from Florida. Welcome to the show, Jane.
Thanks, Steve. Glad to be here.
Great to have you. Also, we have Helen Carrison from our Self-Growth cast, and she's joining us from Belgium. And she is in orange, somewhere on the bottom there.
Yep.
And we also have...
I can't dispute that.
And we also have Jamie Lerner, also from our Self-Growth cast, and she's joining us from Chicago. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
And also Linda Dyer. She's joining us also. She's our Self-Growth cast member as well. And she's joining us from an entire continent called Australia. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful.
Good to have everybody. So our first segment, this is how the show will go. We'll explore in a dialogue the issues and problems with people not knowing their own energy, their own resonance. And in the second segment, we'll explore again in a dialogue some of the tools and some of the modalities that our cast members and our guest cast have used either for themselves or for their clients to help them knowing their own energy and their resonance. So we should probably begin with having Jane explain to us and also to the viewers, what is resonance?
Okay, thanks, Steve. So resonance really is a word that comes from audio, really. It's talking about energetic waves and when they're actually in alignment, in an attunement with each other. And in some ways, I use this because I'm a coach and a trainer. I use this very much to look at, first of all, internal resonance, which is looking at how you show up, basically, in your energy, how in alignment you are, how authentic you are in your energy. And I very much use the chakra system to really look at how attuned you are to your authentic or your core, your true self. And that's internal resonance. That's about how you show up. Once you have that, or you have an awareness of that, a consciousness of that, you can then start to look at how you resonate externally with other people, how you resonate in relationship with other people or other things. Because we're not only in relationship with people, we're also in relationship with things like our business, for example, or our career. And so that's when we start to really look at how the energy is extending out of you and how you begin to connect in the space in between you and another person or another thing.
Fantastic. Now, what would be the opposite of resonance?
Well, the opposite would be dissonance, and that's really where, and we all know what dissonance feels like because it's kind of, well, I wouldn't say it's painful, but it's very uncomfortable. We move away from dissonance really quite intuitively in our lives. So when we meet someone and, we just don't click with them, we experience that as dissonance. So it feels uncomfortable. It's almost like we might be communicating, the other person's communicating, but we're just missing each other somehow, and that's where really we're not in resonance together, and therefore there's a lot of space there in dissonance for us to completely misunderstand each other. So dissonance doesn't feel good. You kind of feel it in your body as well as knowing in your thinking that things aren't right. So it's really quite an uncomfortable emotional feeling, and we tend to move away from it, like I say, because we're all attracted to resonance. That's when you meet someone and you click instantly with them. That's when, you've got resonance in that relationship. And dissonance is when you really just don't click with someone.
Do you think that it is important for us to get more comfortable with dissonance and to create a state of allowing, in the sense that we can be more resonant with ourselves and allowing ourselves also to be dissonant with others?
I think that's a really interesting point that you're raising there, because it's so true. Once we get to a level of conscious awareness, then, we can make a conscious choice when we find ourselves in dissonance about what we do with that. And I think there's an awful lot to be learned from staying in the space where we are feeling dissonant rather than just moving away from it. Because if we move away, there's nothing for us to learn. And really, dissonance is where our own edges lie. This is where we can stretch into the things. And one of the things that I talk about with resonance is agility, flexibility. And if you stay with the dissonance, you can actually start to learn more about yourself, about the other person, and really start to stretch into a different way of being. So yes, I utterly agree with you. I think it's a great thing.
So what would you say?
Isn't it, when we're uncomfortable? We're learning in that discomfort zone rather than the comfort zone. So yeah, perfect. Yeah.
But I think our discomfort could turn into curiosity. So discomfort doesn't have to be uncomfortable. It can be more about how curious can we become about ourselves and how allowing can we be of another. So I'm not a big fan of being just uncomfortable even for a moment. Yeah. And so I don't think that's how I grow, actually.
It's interesting because we've been doing some shows around relationships, and I find it really interesting that you can be totally in resonant with someone and you sort of hook up, and then all of a sudden something happens and you go, where did we lose that resonance? Where did we lose? When did it become so dissonant? Does that make sense? I'm speaking from personal experience, and it was in a relationship I had, and I thought, how did I get it so wrong towards the end? And how did I not see, this breaking down to the point that it had so quickly? Because I remember this guy saying, I remember saying, oh, look, I don't know what more to give this relationship. And he said, why don't you make me feel smaller? And I'm going, oh my gosh, where did I misread what we had? But however, like you said, Jamie, I learned a lot from that. You talk about learnings. It was amazing because I learned that sometimes giving can be cruel. When you give too much, he actually didn't feel that he could do it himself, according to
But I think
me.
we vibrate in and out of relationships and situations all the time, and that's exactly what Jane's talking about. So to identify, our resonance and understanding where we're vibrating in any given moment, and then really looking at those relationships and situations to be our guide to tell us, because sometimes we're not sure.
So Jane, would you say that in order for you to help somebody get to know themselves better and be able to get connected to who they really are and their resonance, they would have to be awake and somewhat conscious already? I mean, can you have this conversation with somebody that is not awake and not conscious?
It's an interesting point, Steve, because actually I think you can have this conversation. And in fact, that's where a lot of my work is. I see a lot of my work is around bridging people from the unconscious and making them more conscious. It's actually an awakening process. But, you can have this conversation and people start to have a sense of it, And the other thing is, when we're consciousness, just like being awake or present, is not a static entity. It's something that changes moment to moment. It's very slippery, in some ways.
Yes.
And so really, who am I to judge really whether somebody's conscious or not? Really, I'm not attached to that. I'm just really helping to facilitate them to a place of maybe a more conscious choice, but to get them to a level of maybe presence, maybe it's just awareness, to really sense that there's something more here than what they may just see purely in the physical sense.
Well, it's not really about judging, Jane. It's about reading. So and that's something that I believe you also teach. I mean, once we can do this for ourselves, obviously then we become pretty good at also be able to read it in others.
But it's interesting, Steve. As soon as you do it for yourself and you become in such a place of connection and awareness, then it's all unconditional. And so you aren't so quick to identify it in another, in the sense that even an observation, it goes without a judgment. something happens. You open up and you become more allowing. And so I think
Well,
it's
yeah, wait a minute. Okay, so for me, that's not reality, okay? Because here's the thing. So yes, I agree that a lot of people are committed to fear, resistance, and judgment. However, and I can admit to you that I know that I myself going in and out of consciousness at least 6 times a minute. However, when I feel something, so the way I live my life these days is I pay a lot of attention to what I'm feeling. And if I feel that something is off with somebody that I'm interacting with, that doesn't have to mean that I'm judging them, and I'm probably not even judging them. I'm just feeling that continuing with this person is not in the best interest of who I am. Does that make sense?
yes, but that's more about your observation of yourself and less about them.
Yes.
Because what you're experiencing is something about you, not about another. And so our interactions with others gives us more information about ourselves and not necessarily information about anybody else.
Okay, well, I don't completely agree with that. What about you, Jane?
Well, I really understand what you're saying there, and I really get the fact that, we do get lots of information, and certainly our body is a great instrument for really knowing. For me, I do get information about other people, and I do get it about myself too. I don't think that I judge. Sometimes I do. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are times when I notice myself in a judgment place. But really, it's about opening up to a bigger, more expansive, it feels to me sometimes like a calling. So it's not really about the other person, and it's not really about me, and sometimes it's not even about the relationship. It's just really about going into flow. Now, I know that sounds like a cliche, but sometimes it's really coming from the field to me, and it feels like a much more expansive source of information than just me and that person within that relationship. Do you understand what I mean?
Yes, and it helps us identify our preferences. And I think that's what that information is helpful for us, in the sense that we are more clear in terms of where we are, who we are, and what we're wanting.
Yes.
So I think that is the actual feedback from the interaction.
Yeah, and also I sometimes get guidance that, comes, for me, I would say it comes from the field. I don't really know where it comes from in some senses, but I sometimes feel guided to do or say or be in a certain way with someone to really help facilitate them into a different way of being. And that might be around me, or it might be just generally speaking.
I think as a tool, Jane, it's phenomenal. To have that, especially when we're coaching. For me, I see the client, I feel the vibration, the resonance that's coming from the client, and I can sit and copy that, and then I can change it. But I'm not changing it. It's like there's, as you say, there's this field of amazement that comes through me. I'm a conduit. And it allows me to get these amazing concepts and ideas that I can impart, and also for the client to say things to me, and then I get these amazing ideas that will assist that client immediately, and it will resonate with the client to a point where they get it. And that's why change happens so quickly. We can't change anybody. However, when we're completely in resonance with the people, especially when we're working with them, it's profound. I watched a couple come to me that wanted a divorce and to leave 2.5 days later, now totally in love. That doesn't come from an unconscious coaching effort. It came from simply being totally present, watching their energy, even when they weren't coaching with me, watching their energy, walking around the garden, watching the tears, watching what they were going through, listening to every word they said and being totally in resonance with them, and then watching the change and then watching each other change. It was profound.
Well, maybe this is partly also what we understand as intuition. You know, when we're guided, we get this sort of these downloads, these feelings, which are then converted into words. And I understand it entirely, Jane. You know, sometimes the words just come and they come from nowhere. You know, so I think that's partly what it's about. It's being in touch and allowing intuition, spirit, if you like, to come through us, because this is what happens. It doesn't come from us. You know, this stuff shines through us,
and it's available
it's
to everybody. Everybody. And that's the other thing that we are modeling for whoever we're helping, is that it is available to everybody who's open to receiving that information and trusting it and using it. So
Jane, what are the clues when we are not resonant? How do we know? Like in the theme, we're saying that usually people know when we are not, but do we? So how do we know? What are the clues that we could count on that we can notice that, hey, wait a minute.
Well, you know, when I tell you this, you know, you're going to know it all already, because we're all very sensitive, and some of us are not conscious in that awareness, but we know when we're out of resonance, because we feel it, you know. And so the
like
first
when we're lying, would you say when we're lying to somebody, we're not being resonant?
Oh. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. Yes, absolutely.
well, what if you're in alignment with the lie? Then you are resonant with that. I mean, I think that if whatever you're saying, if you're in alignment with that, whatever you're doing, then I don't. I mean, I see.
Well, then you wouldn't
often
recognize it
people.
as a lie necessarily.
It's not a lie.
Then
wouldn't
it's not a
recognize
lie.
it as such.
No.
Not to you. And this is where it all gets a bit blurred, isn't it? Because it's also personal. It's our personal perception and and interpretation that is so critical to all of this.
Exactly. Hey, I remember when I was like, I don't know, 15 years younger, that I lied, and I even bought my own lie.
Yeah.
Well, you were very much in alignment with it, so it didn't feel uncomfortable with what you were doing or saying. It didn't feel wrong.
Today I couldn't do that. It would not be in alignment with who I am.
Because you're in a different place.
Yeah, but it's
who else bought the lie at the time, though, Steve? You know, who else bought it? You did. But
I certainly did.
Did everybody else or not? Or did they know that? Did they have a feeling that there was something not quite right?
Yeah, I'm sure people outside of myself probably knew, but I didn't. And that was my question, is like, how could people watching this show recognize themselves when they are not being resonant? What are some of the clues? I mean, I just gave one example. Lying obviously is one. Are there others that you know of, Jane, that you could share with us?
Well, if I can just talk to your lie for a moment, I mean, it sounds like for you to buy into that, you're going to have gone into some level of psychological denial to actually have bought into it to the level that you did. Now you're more conscious, you know, you have a sense. And the work of Byron Katie is great along these lines, because she talks about, you know, just asking a question, how true is that? And I know when I ask that of my clients sometimes, you know, I can just say something. They can state something, and it could be a story or something that they tell themselves a lot. They're used to it. It's habitual. And you just say to them, well, how true is that? And they stop and they think. And 9 times out of 10, they'll say, actually, that's not true at all. So it's interesting how much we do lie to ourselves, and it all really begins with what level of relationship we allow ourselves to have with ourselves. Because, you know, we all talk about relationship as being with somebody external to ourselves, but what about the primary relationship with ourselves? How well do we know ourselves? And how well do we know those things about ourselves that we don't like? The shadow side, you know, it's yin and yang. We should be able to show up whole if we're going to be truly conscious. And sometimes that can be a very uncomfortable thing to do. So to answer your second part of the question, Steve, you know, there is lies, but, you know, whenever we're out of resonance, we know it in our body. But most of us, unfortunately, are unconscious in our body. We live in our heads. So we've kind of cut ourselves off. We're numb from the neck down. We don't know the messages that our body's sending us, because we're kind of taught this from a young age. You know, don't listen to your body. If you're ill, keep going to work. If you're tired, don't stop, keep going. So we're not used to listening to our bodies. And that's one of the first things I'd say to people in resonance. If you're wanting to raise your awareness, start dropping into your body. Listen to it. It's such an instrument. It will tell you instantly and intuitively what's going on for you right now in your life. And most people don't do that.
Very interesting. So I actually had an interesting experience last night. I went out just on the downtown, in a very interesting area. It's all about art. And I was having a conversation with a therapist, actually. And we went on talking for probably 45 minutes to an hour. And towards the end of the conversation, it was a really great connection. I felt really resonant with myself and felt resonant with him. And towards the end of the conversation, I invited him to be on the Living Consciously TV show. And he works with kids. He actually works with kids that are have illnesses like Asperger's disease and also what is that phenomenon?
Autism?
That kids? Yeah, that's the one. Okay, so he works with like kids like between 8 and 12 years old, and I explained to him that on our shows, I mean it's a very positive show, but we do touch a little bit on the negative side as well, because our shows would not be real. We would be completely in la la land if we would just always talk about the positive aspect of everything that we bring to the show. So as soon as I said the word negative, his energy dropped and my defenses came up. And then he was resisting. He was like saying, okay, as long as there's not going to be any negativity on the show, I am okay to come on. And he repeated that like several times. And he says to me, are you aware that all the things that are going on in the public media about kids right now? And I said, yes, I am. And I kept reassuring him that our show is a very positive show. But all of a sudden, there was this energy that dropped between us, and I walked away. I didn't know what else to do with it. So what can you say about that, Jane?
Well, you know, it's interesting. So you're in a social situation, so it's your choice what you do with it. In a coaching situation with that, I just really get someone to stay with whatever emotion is coming up. I'd be saying to them, okay, so what is it that's coming up for you, and where are you feeling this in your body? And I'd be really getting them into their body to really fully experience whatever it is, because I'd want to uncover it with them so that we can get it to a place where they're conscious of what it is. And so really for me, it can be an unpacking process, but it's really getting them to a place where they can pull it out and go, this is it. You know, I can see what this is now. This is you know, a negative emotion, or I'm scared, or it's fear, or it's anxiety, you know, and I'd link it back to, well, you know, what else is coming up? And I'd just go quiet, because actually it's in the
So work with me here, Jane. So he's not here, but I'm here. So what I was feeling is the energy between us has dropped. And I noticed that in my body, and I begin to be uncomfortable.
Right.
So now what?
So do you know where you were feeling that discomfort, Steve?
I was feeling it in my stomach.
Right. So it was really in your gut. And what else was coming up for you? You know, tell me a little bit about it.
Well, what was coming up for me is like, what is going on? Why is he keep repeating? Why is he getting all of a sudden so defensive? And why is he all of a sudden being so protective of himself and of himself coming onto this great TV show? And what's happening with this guy? It's like I'm going like, I don't understand what's going on. And yes, we were in a social situation, so I couldn't really go into any kind of a coaching and I might not even choose to do that, because, you know, I don't know this guy, and I would have to really ask his permission if we could do some work. But he's a therapist, so it was kind of a unique situation, and yeah, it felt really uncomfortable, and to the point where, you know, he was like getting this. He was stepping away from me, and you know, I was just finishing my drink, and I said, you know, it's just time to leave. This is not going anywhere.
Okay. Now, what I'm interested in listening to you talking is not particularly what's going on for him, but what's going on for you in the presence of that level of dissonance. You know, because there's clearly something happening for you in your body, in your energy.
Yes.
You know, that was feeling uncomfortable in some way.
Could what's coming up for Steve, I'm getting almost could be identical for the other person he was talking to?
Potentially it could be.
I'm getting a level, defensiveness, but also a protectiveness. They're both protecting. The guy was protecting what he does with children because he doesn't feel a lot of people do that, and so he's protecting both the children and the work he does with them. And Steve's protecting his show and the fact that it is positive and can have opportunities to really nut out some negative issues to get back to the positive. I'm getting
So we're just talking about ego here. It's just ego meets ego, and
I wasn't going to say that.
so you get disconnected, and your ego kicks in, and then of course there's not much good that can happen after that. So it's
So how could it have been turned around then? You know, could it have been turned around by actually saying, just expressing feeling? So Steve saying, well, you know, I'm really feeling this a drop in the energy, and exploring it and being open to exploring it with the other person.
Yeah, he could say, I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued.
Yeah,
Noticed energy. Rather than, we never understand. We can intrigue or agree or appreciate. So I would say, I'm intrigued. I've noticed an energy drop in both yourself and me.
What's going on? Yeah.
What's going on for you? Because it's an interesting...
Yeah, so I could have said to him what was going on with me.
right.
Yeah.
And so I would do this in order to get connected back. Because I agree with Jamie.
To yourself.
I agree with Jamie. I dropped out of being connected. I dropped out of consciousness. I was in my ego. I was basically mirroring what he was doing. And I decided very quickly, because I'm not interested in that stuff anymore, I just walked away. So that the ego game doesn't continue. I just walked away from it. But that I can see that now that maybe not the best. It was not the best solution for me, because we had a great conversation for like 45 minutes, and all of a sudden this one issue came up, and the whole conversation kind of got destroyed on one thing, and I didn't take the energy and the time to go back and get reconnected. That's just what I see for myself.
That's often what happens, though, isn't it, Steve? You know, that's what happens in relationships. It can just go like that in a second, and none of us are particularly equipped to deal with that and to handle it and to be able to reconnect. We're equipped fundamentally, but we're not aware of that.
No, we're all equipped, and that's it. It's just as simple as that. If you're disconnected, it must be something like ego, because ego is the thing that disconnects us.
You know, it's awareness, because we all have this equipment. We're all intuitive. We all are able to feel our bodies. All are able to be in touch. However, we're not all doing it. So.
Right.
What's
but it would have
missing
been
is
good for Steve to even say, you know, I know that my ego just kicked in, and I'm walking away, and I'm disconnected from myself, and I'm making a conscious choice not to get reconnected. And that in itself, I think, is so powerful. Because in that moment,
great learning.
That you are
you're making a choice.
You're making a choice. Right. You're not a victim to the circumstance. You're not a victim to the person. And you can feel really good about that. Then go back later and think it or not or whatever.
Yeah. I feel that there's no right or wrong in those situations. It's just the way it is, and our response is what it is at the time, and that's where the learning comes in, isn't it?
Yes.
So here we experience both dissonance, Jane, and resonance, because he was dissonant, to the person he was talking to, but resonant with his gut, which is fear, very resonant to the feeling he had in his gut. And, am I going to live with this feeling in my gut, or am I going to walk away and allow the gut to settle?
Exactly. And it's interesting because, Steve, there's a question that I would have, if you were a client, I'd be saying to you to ask yourself in those situations, which is just basically, what assumptions are you making in that moment that actually give you the meaning that the only way that you want to deal with this is to walk away? Because if you can identify some of the assumptions that you're making, and it may be that you feeling the energy drop might be an assumption. I don't know, but really think about that, because
Well, I justified it, Jane. As we usually justify
Yeah.
these things, I justified it. And how I justified it is, it's way past my bedtime. I had one more beer to drink than I should have drunk. And I just need to get the hell out of here. I'm really done with this, basically.
So it's never about the action. It's always about how you feel about the action. So leaving was great. How you felt about leaving, maybe that's where it wasn't so great. So if you can choose to leave feeling good, I think that would be better for the next time.
No, I felt great leaving. I basically, wanted to protect myself for that conversation to go any further. I didn't want to play in the sandbox of ego. Okay, I didn't
great.
know at the moment. I didn't know. And look, I do this show, and I take leadership of this show, and I take leadership of a lot of things that I do in my life. And at the moment, when I was there, I wasn't a leader because I wasn't able to access what I needed to access, which is what Jim was talking about. This is how simple it is. I'm doing this because I think this is beneficial to all of us and to the viewers, because this is real. I'm sharing something that just happened last night. It's very real.
Great example.
And I'm not the only one. I'm sure that these things are happening too. And what I see today is I'm going wow, I spent 45 minutes having a great connection with somebody. We talked about a lot of stuff, and it was really good, and it was really cool. And I destroyed it in less than 5 minutes.
Can I just say something that's coming up for me when I'm listening to you talk, Steve? Because there's a bigger question here for me, which is that all of us that work or coach in this sphere, and we're all on Living Consciously TV today. I'd kind of come back with you with something to what you've just said, because what I was hearing was that you weren't on at that time, you weren't a leader at that time, so it wasn't your responsibility. But I'd put back to you that all of us have a responsibility, not just to bring a message to the world, but to actually embody that message everywhere that we go. Now, I know that's an ideal, and I really do understand what you're saying, but to me, I'd like to really say, shouldn't we be switched on all the time?
Well, yes. So, Jane, then I'll have to ask you, are you always switched on, Jane?
No, absolutely not. I'm not. I'm not. No. And it's interesting because, with things like resonance and consciousness, the more aware I become, and there are times when I'm really switched on, and there are times where I'm so unconscious, it's kind of embarrassing. So it's really interesting, though, because for me, the challenge, the curiosity in my own life is around how do I get to a level of resonance, a level of consciousness, and embody that everywhere I go. So I try not to make the conscious choice to say, well, actually, I'm not at work now, so therefore I'm off the hook. I try very much to kind of be there if I can.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because when you can do that more and more and more, you tend not to run into people or deal with people that have any ego at all, because you're not someone they can bump up against. As soon as their ego kicks in, it just goes right through you. So it dissipates very quickly, and people get very comfortable and get reconnected with themselves. So we are the living, breathing examples of what can be. And I think the more that we practice that, the better for us, and of course, the better for others. So, yeah.
That's what it's all about. That's what we're doing, isn't it? It's like when you're when you're flexible, when you absorb something, then it has no impact.
That's right.
It's only when you resist it and become hard in some way, as a figure of speaking, that actually you feel it. So by just letting everything, the water off a duck's back, if you like, to allow it all to flow over you, then that's the ideal. That's what we're all working
calming. It's so calming, isn't it? That working with the ego is really quite tense. Whereas I find when you can just nod your head and smile at someone's behaviour and you think, wow, this is just very calming.
Well, I have to nod your head and smile at your own behaviour as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
There's a bigger question for me as well, which is around, I just read a book written by Alexander Lowen, and it was called Fear of Life, and he's a great body worker. He's in his 90s now. But he talks about how you open to life, or how you close down in fear of life. And this is something that's very interesting, about your situation, Steve, and the conversation you were having, because the question that comes up for me is, how do we stay open to resonance, or the potential or the possibility of resonance, even in the face of dissonance? How do we do that?
That's a great question,
isn't it?
That is wonderful.
Yes, I agree. And this is perfect because we are already in our second segment, of course, which is about tools and modalities. And that is actually the work that we have in front of all of us. And it has to do with catching ourselves. You see, I see now perfectly clear by sharing this with you that last night I didn't catch myself. Okay, I just gave into the ego, and I let the ego do what the ego does, which is, I already explained. I don't need to explain it again. But there was an opportunity there for me to take control. The real Coach Steve to take control. I let my ego to take control and run with it. But there's an opportunity, and all of us have this opportunity, I think, in every situation that we get ourselves into, like that. And maybe we could explore that a little bit with any tools that you may have, Jane, or anybody else. How do we catch ourselves when the ego is taking control, and how do we switch back to the real us?
First thing is actually being aware of not being aware, if you like. As soon as you become aware of the situation and what you were talking about, your experience yesterday, Steve, you became aware of that energy drop, and you became aware that something had shifted.
And that was the opportunity. Moment. That was the opportunity right there. I agree.
That's the opportunity. However, it doesn't. The opportunity, you didn't take the opportunity right at that time. However, you were aware.
Because who know? Hang on. Who noticed? Helen? Who noticed that the energy dropped? Is it the real me, or is it my ego? It's not my ego. My ego doesn't care.
No, your body felt it.
It's the real me that noticed, and that was probably the last time that I was connected to myself, right there. Right?
I think you're being very judgmental on yourself here. I think that you become aware of these. You can become aware of these situations and just allow them to be, and just explore. And you might not explore it in the moment. I mean, you're exploring it now, right? And that's okay, because this is all learning. And the next time you're in that situation, you'll be that much more aware, more quickly.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, so I think it's about allowing yourself, just allow yourself to be who you are, and being who you are, warts and all, as we say, and just work with it.
Yeah, but allow yourself to be who you are is confusing, okay? Because what are we talking about? Which you are you talking about when you say who you are?
I'm not talking about
your connected self.
You. I'm talking about that situation, that in that present time, allowing yourself to experience what you experience in that present moment. You don't have to put a label on it. You don't have to say, oh, this is the ego, this is that, you just experience what it is and become aware of what's happening. So the energy drop, your reaction to it, the feeling in your gut, and so on. Because that awareness is the first step to actually being able to connect with how you want to react, how you feel more resonant, if you like.
And I think the ego is our friend. I mean, the ego, we can ask our ego to kindly stand down. And that's a lovely request in order for us to kind of reconnect and just kind of flow into the next moment. So
Actually, I a statement where you just say, excuse me, ego, I'm just going to put you in my pocket.
and I think that that's lovely, and I encourage my clients to laugh. So I am laughing all the time because there is a moment where it's subtle and you make a choice. And, I think that you can laugh and kind of have some fun with it. It doesn't have to be you judging yourself or getting down on yourself or anything. It's a moment, and that's it. So a moment is a choice.
My son was having an argument with another member of his band, and the band member said, I really want a singer that doesn't have an ego. I said, good luck with that one.
Yeah.
I said, the ego gets him on stage. I said his skills allow him to work with the audience, but the ego actually gets him up there onto the stage. So good luck finding a singer without an ego.
Jane, would you repeat what you were saying before we had a little trouble with your audio? Please.
Yes, I can if I can remember. That's the honest thing. What were we talking about?
So you're actually talking about the 5 senses that our information comes in, and the 6th sense being the higher intelligence.
Okay, so what I was saying is really I'd tell people to raise your level of awareness by really becoming multi-sensory in your communication. Before you even bother with the 6th sense, worry about your 5 senses, and something I call whole body listening is really learning and practicing how to listen to yourself and be present with yourself, almost like an ontological perspective, at the same time as noticing what's going on outside you in your environment and with the people around you. And literally, it is a skill, that learning how to notice yourself and notice your responses and reactions in response to what's going on around you. But it is using all of your 5 senses, because most people don't, and that's where it all begins.
So this doesn't have to be the end of this relationship that Steve had with this guy last night, does it? I mean, he had an amazing resonance, and some dissonance happened, and then he's got these amazing learnings now. So if what you got from 3/4 of an hour, Steve, was, and your ego allowed, it would allow you to make a phone call and say, wow, what an interesting conversation we had last night, and then be honest about what you felt happened. And
I can actually, I have an opportunity to clean it up. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It could be the beginning of the relationship.
And I will.
Yeah.
and we want to hear how it goes.
Yeah. Well, he'll probably be on the show, so.
Well, that would be an interesting one, yeah.
All right, so I'm curious about, is it enough to be just authentic, Jane? Because we talk a lot about that here on the show, to be authentic and to be real and to be present, but is that enough?
For what?
For who?
To live the life that Jane described earlier in the show, which is to be alive, like to be completely and to be turned on 100%.
Is that enough? It's interesting because I think it depends. Everybody has a different definition of what that would be. And my answer to you is that what I would like for myself personally is to be able to show up so that I can be the full expression of myself. And that's certainly something that I hold for my clients as well, is how do we move fully into this opening with life as it comes to us, with the relationships that come our way? How do we fully open to that? And how do we bring the whole of ourselves to that relationship, to our life, so we're fully engaged, so we're fully alive? How do we do that? And I feel myself, the more I feel into this as myself, the more I notice where I close down, by degrees, but I close down in different relationships, in different circumstances. And that's very interesting to me, to know what is it that triggers me to close or protect in some way, and where in my life am I able to be fully open, because that's very interesting to me, those places, those spaces where I can fully engage and feel safe enough to do that.
Yeah.
And that's
really,
personal, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's no blanket response or solution. It's a very personal thing, and because we'll all be different. We'll all have different feelings. in that way.
The freedom
so I have
dependent upon
I have another good
another's
one.
response. That's kind of
Yes,
it.
yes.
That's 100% it. So when you get to that point where you can be you, no matter how someone is responding to you,
Exactly. Yeah.
you are so
Yeah.
free. I mean, that's everything right there.
All right, so I got to be alive because there's something coming to me really strongly that I want to check out with all of you. So here it is. Okay, so do you have this experience, or have you had this experience in relationship with people where you develop a certain listening for them, like it's almost like you learn who they are being, and it doesn't matter what they do, they're going to show up for you just the way you have decided that who they are. And those people can actually grow in time and in space. They can actually be on their journey and change, but you still see them in that certain way, that certain listening that you have for them. Does this make any,
Yes,
is this
makes
congruent
great
at all
sense.
with anything?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
So what is that about, and how do we let that go?
It's about you needing someone to be a certain way for you, is what it's about, instead of letting someone be who they are. And it's about someone being strong enough to say, I am not going to be someone different for you. I'm just going to be myself.
Jane?
Easy.
Next.
Your homework for today, Steve.
If it was that easy, ladies, we wouldn't have 52% of people getting divorced in this country. If it was that easy.
Yeah, it's very interesting what you're raising, Steve, to me, because, it is very much what Jamie was talking about is, when you show up anywhere, when any of us show up anywhere, we're so into the bonds, the quality of connections, and this is kind of like a primal instinct for all of us, is that we want a good quality of connection with people, or certainly with some people in our lives. But, when that doesn't happen, or how much do we need back from somebody else? And that's interesting in itself, If you can show up and not need really anything back, you can still show up as yourself and be fully true to who you are, then, I think in many ways,
it.
you're just
That's
letting
it.
it go. Yeah.
That's it. That's it.
That's it?
Yes, it is. That's it.
Show's over?
The meaning of life.
Okay, come
So
on.
easy to say, so hard to do.
I think the more you practice it, the easier it gets and the better it feels. I mean, really.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit. Let's
This
talk
is
about
true.
the chakras a little bit. You intrigue me.
Okay, what would you like to know,
How do
Steve?
you use the chakra system with your clients? Like how do you connect that to who they are being and who they really are?
Okay, well, one of the things I do is I tend to work physically with clients as well, and I work energetically. So the chakra system, it's a model of 7 levels of energy, basically, but it also ties into the model that is 7 levels of consciousness as well. And so when I find, or when a client will tell me that they're feeling stuck, and they'll use language to describe what it is, I'll actually get them to tell me about in their body. So your challenge before was level 3, which interestingly is the power base for you in your energy system. And that's also where, as you get from level 3 to level 4, that's really where you start to transcend the ego and get beyond the ego. So it was very true that it was your ego that was kicking in, because level 3 is really the powerhouse of the ego. And so chakra level 3, you were feeling it in your gut, and there was a reason for that, and there is things that, I can teach, say, like you to do if you're ever in that situation again. Rather than dropping a conversation, you can just turn slightly to the side, because animals, when they go belly up, that's when they're really showing their vulnerability of their underside of their belly. It's the same for us as humans. Our level 3 is very often in our solar plexus, what we need to protect. So if you were to just shift your body to slightly to the side, that would mean that you weren't face to face, belly to belly, level 3 to level 3, head on with whoever it was where you were feeling the
Yeah,
side
we
of-
were standing in front of each other, towards each
Right.
other. Yeah.
So
Okay.
you'd actually feel it viscerally in your gut. So, just moving, it can be as simple as that. You're just deflecting. And now you're no longer belly up to that person who is feeling dissonant for you. So that's one thing that you can do there. So I
Okay.
use it in many different ways.
Awesome. Awesome.
How often can you get men to do that with each other?
Actually, quite a lot. It's
good. That's good.
Yeah,
I'm surprised because it seems that they go toe to toe, and there isn't this sense of like, I'm going to turn or I'm going to give in or I'm going to walk
conceding,
away.
isn't it?
Yeah, that's interesting.
It is.
It's a great tool, though.
It is, and it takes a lot of trust for me to build up with a client. I mean,
Wow.
that's not necessarily something I can do on a first set.
Something just came to me, again, a light bulb. So remember when I said that for 45 minutes I had this conversation with this guy? It was awesome.
Yeah.
Guess what we were doing? We were sitting at the bar next to each other, but not facing each other.
Yeah.
Okay.
And when we had the energy dropping is when I went to the bathroom, I got up, went to the bathroom, I came back, and by the time I came back, he was standing, talking to some other people, and I joined the conversation. And then all the other people left, and it just left us standing there, the two of us, in front of each other, and we were face to face, gut to gut. Isn't that interesting?
So it's a different, you're in a different environment, actually, at that
And
stage.
A different relationship with your energy as well. It's kind of head-on collision.
Okay. From now on, I'm only going to take that
You
position
can't go
with
to the
ladies.
bathroom.
Guys are going to have to sit next to me. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the flow. We all talk about the flow of things, and I really get, there are so many times during the day that I'm in the flow of things where everything just works. Everything is connected. I'm thinking about somebody, the next thing I know, the phone rings, they're on the phone. It's just amazing things happen in the flow. And then I of course, also know the opposite when I'm in the block of energy, when nothing is happening and all I want to do is lay down on my bed and take the curled up position.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about that. Can we explore that for about a minute?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd say listen to your body. If you want to go and curl up, that's what you must do. Don't try and force yourself into the flow. You can't push into it. Just allow it.
Okay, great.
But, I think the more we practice being in and out of the flow, we realize it's up to us. Once again, it's a moment. You can have a moment of being out of the flow and in the next moment be in the flow. And a lot of it is about managing our thoughts and how our thoughts are connected to our feelings and our body and all of that. So, reach for a better thought or don't reach for a better thought, but no, it's up to you. I think every moment we can be either in or out of the flow. It's a choice.
And I think what you said, Jane, is perfect, that sometimes, we can have a lot of energy, but I think it's really important to listen to your body and just have that time out. I did that yesterday. I was up here on this show, because it's very early in the morning for me, and then I went off and did a fitness class in the pool, and I came back and I was spent. And I thought, what's going on? This girl that has all this energy. I just sat on the lounge with both my dogs belly up.
Okay, so we're coming to the end of the show, ladies. So let's spend the last minute really wisely, which would, for me, mean let's go around and everybody just say one thing that they would like to recommend to our viewers, like a tip, how to stay in resonance. Jane?
Listen to your body.
Okay.
You took the words right out of my mouth. Yeah, Linda. Yeah, listen to your body. Really, that's the key. It's the instrument that you have, so use it. Whole body listening. And notice when you want to push out and when you want to retreat. Just notice, because if you can do that, you're going to flow with your own pace and timing. And that's really important for you.
I would think the listening is really important, but then actually once you've listened, behave or act or accordingly, and so actually take that listening and the understanding that you're getting from the listening and work with it. Yeah.
Okay.
I would
Jane?
say lots of laughter. Lots and lots of laughter is a good way to get connected, and especially in the moments when it seems the most difficult, laughter is the way to go.
Great.
And a bubble bath, a big bubble bath.
I'm going to use my own example real quick. So my own example is when you feel like the example I used earlier, when you feel the energy is dropping, that's the time to notice. It's like an awesome moment in time and space, and take advantage of it and see if, for me, like I could have the conversation and the connectedness with myself and with the person I was talking to back if I paid attention. Okay, so pay attention to what you're feeling. And with that, we are actually at the end of the show, and I would like to thank our guest cast, Jane, and also the rest of the cast on the show, and everybody that's working behind the glass, making this happen. And I just want to invite all of our viewers to come to our website at livingconsciously.tv and vote on all of our shows so that we can be played frequently on channel 56, 57, and 219. And I love you all, and we'll be back again next week, same time, same place, live on Comcast Channel 56 on Living Consciously TV. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye, everyone.